Good evening, everyone. In today's event, organized by the Sundarbans Oratory Club, on the topic Women Then versus Now, we are going to discuss the role of women in the society over the years. Greek philosopher Heraclitus is referred for the ideology change is the only constant. And just like any other aspect of our life and all the fields of our social and economical society, role of women in the world has changed drastically over the years. So much so that if Heraclitus were to look around today, he himself would be amazed. Today, young girls grow up with dreams and aspirations that just didn't seem possible decades ago. Today, young girls grow up with women role models that are strong, independent, and strong willed. Today, young girls grow up watching strong and imperfect women characters rather than repetitive and plagiarized good wife images. Today, young girls grow up with taking education as their basic human right rather than a luxury. However, whether these rights that come with inbuilt responsibilities are accompanied as good as their rights themselves is controversial. So, at today's event, we will discuss all these points and much more. Foremost, we'll begin with what I consider as the most important tool to success education. So, what do you think that education, how the role of women in education and how their right to education has changed over the years? You can unmute yourselves and or raise your hands to give your points. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Nice event. I think things have changed a lot. Like earlier, women, since you're talking about education and learning, right? So I think women growing up were taught different things, and men growing up were taught different things. Like, for example, um, if you talk about ancient Greece, men were sent off to gymnasiums where they would, which were like ancient Greek schools, where they would learn the art of war uh, and military tactics and everything that has to do with serving in the armed forces. And if you talk about ancient India, I think men were sent off to gurukuls where they would learn about the ancient texts, the shastras, and also again about a lot about warfare and combat. And I think women were taught more about how to take care of homes and how to raise children. And in many cases, women weren't allowed to go to school at all. So I think that has changed a lot over the last, especially the last 200 years, and things have changed really fast uh, in terms of education. And I think today we live in a society where men and women can learn the same things. It depends more on what their personal inclinations are and not what society expects of them. So yeah, I think that has changed in terms of education.
Yes, definitely. The bar to what a person can learn has definitely gone beyond the gender over the years. If anyone else has to say anything about this point, please raise your hands. Just to add on to what Anshuman just said, like over the years that what we have seen is definitely the mode of education and the type of education that has been given to women or any other gender has changed. But along with that, the scale of education has also changed. Like women in rural India, for example, they weren't given that much access to education earlier that they are given to now. If anyone else has, yes, Kunal, please go ahead.
Good morning. Sorry, good evening. So I just want to add to what Anshuman said by, like he said in ancient times, the economics of the world was not as complex as it is now, and the need to earn or sustain yourself, I think in the ancient times wasn't as much as it is now. So anyone who is living in the modern era today, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, it has become a necessity for people to work and earn money or any sort of resources by whatever work they do. So the the need to sustain yourself, or the absolute necessity to sustain yourself, has further lessened the gap of why a woman shouldn't be educated, or just be at home. So in my point of view, it is also a necessity for everyone to work and get educated. Thank you.
Yes, definitely, Kunal. The external factors are also quite influential when it comes to education and literacy. If anyone else has to add on to something, then please go ahead. You can unmute yourselves or you can raise your hands. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, and just circling back to the point that I was making earlier, it's very interesting how a lot of armed forces around the world are now allowing women to enlist and join, including the Indian Army and various armies across the world. So, warfare, which was earlier a domain specifically for men and men only, is now also open to women. So, I think just like that, lots of professions that were previously uh, uh, forbidden for women are now open, and that has definitely changed. And I think the biggest contributor to all of this is like if we look at Western history, even in the 1900s, women weren't, even in countries like the United States or the UK, women weren't liked. Like, society didn't like women seen outside their homes, and they were restricted to domestic chores. But when the First World War happened, then when the male population of all of these countries were out fighting, the women were for the first time at a really large scale employed in factories. And when the First World War was over, the women did not want to go back home. They wanted to continue working, and that was definitely a big inflection point in terms of women working, and women learning the same things as men. And then also, I think from that way, like if you look at economies 200 years ago and before that, almost everything was done by men. All goods and services were produced by men, but that has changed a lot over the years. And yeah, and I think yeah, it's definitely more equitable today. So Kunal has raised his hand. He wants to say something.
Okay, you can finish, Anshuman. I'll just add on after you finish.
I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. So I just I once heard this speech, or this I once saw this YouTube video in my recommendations by Sadhguru. It was about a similar topic. Like I really liked what he said, even though I don't follow him that much. But I saw his video. I really liked how he differentiated between how the work in the world is divided into two parts. One is the brain and one is the muscle, he said. So these are two things. Previously, the work, as Anshuman mentioned, was mostly muscle. And when the work is muscle based or requires strength, then the male gender inherently has a biological advantage over the women. But as and when the the work is, shifts towards brain rather than muscle. Like if the mind is required more than the body, then the gap closes even further. So women are able to perform almost or in many cases perform equivalently or even better in some cases than men, or like be able to compete, like because in when it comes to working in muscle or working with the body, they might not be able to be as efficient as men. But uh, as the world progresses and we go into a more modern digital era, and the work becomes more brain based, mind based, then uh, it naturally shifts towards a more gender agnostic world. Thank you.
Very truly said, Kunal. Uh, so if anyone else has any point, then we can discuss that right now. We move on to the next point. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Kunal raised a very interesting point, and yeah, I think in ancient times most of the heavy lifting was definitely done by men. But if you, I'll compare like Western society and ancient Indian society. So in the Western society, um, uh, uh, you can say towards the medieval period it was mostly serfdom. So whereas like there's a king, there are nobles under the king who are landlords, and then everyone else, the whole population of that nation or state or that city state are basically serfs. So they work on the fields for the noble, for the lord of the land, and they just work there, and that is how they sustain themselves. And obviously they don't get to keep anything. All of the grain that is harvested goes to the lord. And even though yeah, men do have a physical biological advantage, but both men and women were working on the fields back then. And then in ancient India, definitely, we obviously had the varna ashram. So society was divided to classes, and you had to follow whatever your lineage practiced as a trade or a craft. So like if you were born a kshatriya, you had to be employed in the army. And if you were, let's say, a prajapati, you had to work in pottery. And so yeah, again, there even in those cases, there are historical instances of women working. But yeah, mostly women were confined to like the domestic sphere, and everything else the was done by men. And yeah, so things have changed a lot very quickly. Yeah, so for like 5,000 years things have been different, and like in just the last 2 centuries things have changed a lot. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Over the time, things has changed drastically, and that is the whole point of this discussion. So now we'll move on to the next point. Uh, what do you think that the role of how social evils over the years against women? There has been a lot of discussion around what social evils exist against women. How do you think that those social evils have changed, and how do you think that the mentality of our society as a whole has changed regarding those social evils, such as child marriage or sati pratha or triple talaq, or any other social level that you think has changed over the years? If anyone else has anything to say about it, you can raise your hands or you can unmute yourselves. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest predicaments that women historically have been in, that they were not economically independent, so they had to put up with whatever circumstances they were in. And I saw this documentary by I think like two British journalists, and they took like a secret camera inside Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia, inside Saudi Arabia, you're not allowed to film, shoot anything. If journalists do come, they come under the supervision of the government. So these people were basically documenting life in Saudi Arabia. And one really interesting part I found in that video was they showed this part where women in burqas were basically begging, and they explained that basically what happens is that over here, since women aren't allowed to work, basically when the woman's husband dies, she's basically on the street. So even though like if she has good networks or connections, people can take care of her. But if the husband dies, she's basically on the streets. And I mean, that reality is not, I think, too far from how it has been historically. So like a woman who does not have a living family member or does not have a husband is basically is in a very, very bad situation. Whereas I think today, because women are in the workforce, can join the workforce and can study, they are pretty much independent. So like if they do find themselves in such a situation where they don't have a living family member, they can go on and work for themselves. And yeah, so it's just like that moment in the documentary was like a time capsule. So like it just like hits you on the head, like, okay, like this has been the condition of women so far in history. And yeah, that has changed.
Yeah, definitely. Just to add on to the line, just like you said that that documentary was showing how historically things have been. Just even in India, if we think of it on a national perspective, we have seen that child marriage age has increased over the years. But if we look historically, then girls at very young age were married off to other families, and there they were not given it much education or much source to earn themselves or to be independent. Thus, they weren't considered much independent, and hence your point is very right. So if anyone else has to say something, please go ahead. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Kunal, you want to say something?
Yes, so I just want to answer what Lavanya said. Like I have 2 points which I just want to say, like why women have been, have started becoming more independent in the society. I think it is mainly because of two reasons. One, which Anshuman mentioned, is that they become economically or financially independent, which is the most important thing. Like in my opinion, like if you are financially independent, then you are to a large extent free to make your own choices and do whatnot. But the second thing that is sadly I think is that women the women have had to uh, gain respect, sadly enough, for whatever position that they hold in the society over the years. And uh, child marriage and sati pratha and everything stopped only through a generational change. When one generation, like when the older generations proved that women were equally were respectable and efficient, and whatnot. They could work and earn for the family, and run homes. At the same time, uh, women were financially independent. So I think those things passed on generation after generation, and um, spread across India. I'm basically just talking about India right now. So in India, the change has been pretty passed on from generation to generation, as this thing is something which cannot happen at an instant, or this thing cannot happen instantly in just a few years, in my opinion. So through proving that women can be independent and gain that sort of respect, which is again unfortunate, but yes, which is the sad truth that women have had to face, and they are in a way better position than they were like 20-30 years ago.
Yes, definitely, Kunal. Even though women had to face a lot of atrocities, the brighter side of the story is that now the situation is much, much better. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead. Raise your
Yeah,
hand.
I just wanted to add to a point you made about the child marriage thing. So it was two-way. Both men and women were very young when they got married. Like for example, even Gandhi and his wife, when they got married, they were teenagers. So it wasn't like a one-way street where the woman is too young, but the man is too old. Although that does happen in some cultures and some countries, but not in the Indian context. And Sati Pratha, as horrible as it is, we must attach a sense of scale and weight to it, because uh, Sati Pratha was often the exception and not the norm, in the sense that there is historical account of these events happening. For example, when Ahilya Bai Holkar's husband died, she wished to commit sati, but her father-in-law stopped her and told her not to do it, and therefore she did not do it. So sati has mostly been optional, where if a woman feels that her soul resides with her husband, she also departs with him in that same pyre. So it's mostly a you thing, not a must do thing. So yeah, but still pretty horrible. You shouldn't have to die just because your husband died, right? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, definitely. The child marriage was two ways. Both the boy and the girl were quite young during child marriage. But the thing which I wanted to highlight was that even after marriage, boys were given the right to education, but girls were not given that equivalent right to education after marriage in cases of child marriage. They were given the responsibility of household chores and maintaining their family life, whereas the boys were given the role to get education, get trained, and earn the bread and butter for the family. Yes, Anshul.
Yeah, very true. And I also want to touch briefly upon the average life expectancy of the past days. It used to be close to 20, then it increased to 40, 30. So people used to die by that age, by the time they were 20, 30 and 40. And so we definitely cannot use that historical use today's lens to judge how it used to be back then, because they used to die pretty early. And then also even men, by the time they were 14, 15, 16, they would have fought their first war by the time they're that age. So yeah, and that was again roughly the time that they got married. So yeah, that has historically been the case. Shubham Shekhar wants to say something.
So previously, what Lavanya said that men and women were equal, like married at the same time, but women were not given the privilege to for education, right? So what the thing is like, how are you telling that one job was more important than other? Having to like working in the households was equally or even more important than uh, like educate like to get education and handling all of the other worldly stuffs. So here uh, there is a like big like for the current thinking process which we have, we can clearly determine that everyone should get education, household work can be done later. But that at that time the mentality which was that every work was divided not among the men and women of the classes, but even our in the Indian Vedas system, the work culture has been divided through varnas, right? So there were four different varnas. The same kind of principle which was applied on the varnas was also applied on gender, and that gender. Uh, so that pardon me. Okay, yeah. So that actually the gender bias actually is a byproduct of that thing coming like from generations going through that thing on the generations. So saying that their work like they had all women had the privilege to stay at their house, do not care about other worldly stuff, and like remain just help with the household stuff. So meanwhile, the men of the world can deal with all of the other worldly stuff. At that time in India, it is well documented that there were like several female leaders at that time as well, who wanted to join or who wanted to have education, or who were better suited than men of their kingdom or of their places to rule. So there was an opportunity for the women at the ancient India, and there it was not banned. But the like so once you try to enforce one thing, it becomes culture. And like among generations, like when generations passes, a single misinformation can become a culture. So that is the issue which happened to India. I don't think that like forcing women to, like, it was not actually forcing, but like so giving them, like dividing the work was actually a bad thing. So it was forcing. The forcing is a bad thing, but dividing was not a bad thing. And that is not based on how like for any other mental bias, but rather than the physical strength of the individuals. Like, because men are well suited for the outside world, so because like they didn't have to, like say uh, there are times when women cannot deal with other world stuff, and they need full comfort. So that time those works will be stopped. So that time, those, because of that period, no one could have actually so it was not well suited for women, some jobs were. So that is the case. Also, women like going through the ages, women became physically weaker than men. So that is why I think.
I hope, Shubham, you are talking about earlier times. Uh, as
Yeah.
a today's woman, I like might not agree with you. So yeah. Also, earlier, even in the east side or in the south side, you see like there are records that women used to work out in the outer space. That's not the case everywhere. There are records that shows that in the east and the south, women used to go out and the men used to stay at home. But now they are more acknowledged in the current situations, and they participate more in the outer world as well. More people are joining the workspace, men as well as women, in the equal amount, I guess. So yeah, the more has been changed, I guess. Yeah.
No, even if you look at some cultural rituals, it requires women involvement to be there. Like for like say, so in the northern regions, there are so some rituals like say
Shubham, Shubham,
Yagyopal.
Shubham,
Yeah.
Shubham, if you want to speak, please raise your hand. Lavanya or I will recognize you, and then you can talk. So don't speak out of turn. You can continue for now. Go
No,
ahead. Go
sorry, I'm
ahead.
done.
Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'm done.
Okay. All right. So Kunal wants to say something.
Okay, so I just want to add to what Shubham said by saying, like, he made a good point, like dividing is fine, but forcing is not okay. So basically, uh, like the most basic thing where the most basic environment, like not even speaking at the country scale, but speaking at a small family scale of maybe let's say 4 members, where there's a mother, father, and 2 children. I would say for, like today's world is too dynamic to be stuck with a rigid pattern of who is going to do what. Due to that, it makes more sense that uh, people or a couple basically divides or distributes work as is convenient to them, and not as is has been convenient over the years. So basically, when the work is given forcefully, or it is made against a certain gender's will, then I think the problem arises, or the problem that becomes an issue. Otherwise, if like I said, today's world is too dynamic to be stuck into who is going to do what work. So if basically two people are willing to compromise and do certain chores on their own, or for the family or for the home, then I think that is fine. So yes, Shubham, finally, the thing that I want to say is forcing is not fine, but distributing is okay.
Yes, definitely, Kunal. Consensual distribution is quite important in any case. Yes, Bharat, please go.
I want to speak on today's topic regarding women. Am I audible?
Yes, Bharat, you're
Hello.
audible.
Okay. So can I start my note?
Go ahead, Bharat.
Okay. 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 Sure. So I want to discuss about women's. I think I may be lateral from the topic, but I want to present my views. So, in ancient culture, the women have very high status with men in all aspects of life. The women scholars in ancient India, on which we are very much proud of, like Devi Gargi. She was very great Indian philosopher, renowned expounder of Vedic texts, the sciences, and one of the gems in the court of King Janaka. And this was like the ancient introduction of our culture. But now, when the invasions occurred or happened on our land, motherland, some atrocities were there, some boundaries, some foundations came, like you will not put your feet out. And these perceptions were right for that time due to some security issues, personal issues, and I think this era was the black one for development, not only for women, but for everybody. But when we got independence, after a huge struggle by our freedom fighters, we are now independent. We are now in independent India. So I think there is a reform now. I think so. The great Indian philosopher like Swami Vivekananda also believed that the welfare of world depends on empowerment of women. Recently, I met with Miss Nidya Viraj. She is a young VC, South Asia at NVIDIA. She's very nice person and she guides startups for their strategies and provides support. I got influenced by her and proud to meet such a nice person. Uh, she's very progressive and women are doing very great in the as we say in entrepreneurial culture or in jobs or in any aspect. They are doing such a great development. This was all knowledge yet, but I can say that in my class or in major cases, the girls score more than boys. And this was the case. And so in today's era, they are great. They are doing great. So I close my note and best wishes to all my women friends for the future. Thank you. I was not prepared
Yes, Bharat,
like
definitely. You have put
so.
forward some no, you have some very good points forward. Like definitely, even in ancient times and today, women are there who are doing exceptionally well in their respective fields, and we should always respect those women and always appreciate their efforts. So, if anyone else has to put forward their point, they can raise their hands or unmute themselves. If not, then yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Do we want to talk about women and the legal sphere and how laws related to women have changed over the years. I think we should talk about that.
Yes, definitely. That was a point that we were going to discuss, but we can discuss it now if everyone agrees with it.
Sure. So I think things have changed really quickly from women being on the losing side of things when it comes to rights and freedom, and it has quickly changed, at least in the legal sense, that you are starting to see laws that were made to protect women and to save them from coercion or any kind of pressurization. And those laws we see these days are being misused a lot. And of course, and the scale is important, obviously. Like if you compare the rape cases to the false rape cases, you can definitely say that rapes happen more often than false rape cases. But that flip side is also quickly starting to catch up, where laws that were made to protect women and are being used by unethical people. And what do you guys think about that? About how that problem can be solved?
Yeah, I think some people take advantage of this in the form of laws that they put false cases, uh, मतलब in behind the girls, मतलब कि जैसे they take the advantage of the laws and put the person behind the bars, and he used to suffer. So I think the science can work in there. Like some technologies are there for picking the fraud, uh, or that's all I think.
Yes, definitely. All of this also reminds me that even recently there was a case when a girl, the video went quite viral, where the girl was just beating the driver, the cab driver, and saying that, yeah, he has molested me or he has mistreated me. And also there was this case of that Zomato delivery guy. And all these cases are a very good testimonial to how the rights have been mistreated. And because of these mistreatments of rights, the ones who actually suffer often get sidelined, because the ones who are actually not sufferers, they act like victims and they reduce the empathy of people regarding these issues.
One more thing, that the guys which are
Bharat, Bharat,
really-
Bharat, Bharat, hold on. You have to raise your hand before you speak, okay? So it doesn't get chaotic. Just raise your hand and we'll recognize you, okay? Yeah, go
Yes,
ahead.
I think the guys which are really passionate about helping girls, or they are in the brotherhood, uh, uh, they afraid after such cases occur, like a false case will put on them, and so it is also an issue, I think.
yes, definitely. Also, when it comes to cases like domestic violence, when there's domestic violence against women, then it is treated as a very heinous issue, and rightly so. But when the same thing is vice versa, or when there's domestic violence against men, then it is considered to be hilarious or not as grave as that. So such mistreatments or such discrimination does exist nowadays if we look around. So if anyone else has to say anything regarding this, you can raise your hands and put your point forward.
If I may just add to the flip side of this whole thing, I oh sorry, I'm actually
Yes,
Yes,
Kunal,
Kunal,
please
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
So sorry for not raising my hand. So yes, I just want to add to the flip side that yes, the false cases exist, and I heard about this one case, like he was uh, a guy from around somewhere in Delhi. He gave a TED talk regarding how uh, a girl filed a charge against him for violence, for hitting her or something, and how he had to uh, go back and forth in the police station, and do all these court cases for around 4 to 5 years till he finally proved himself not guilty. So by then, like the way he described it in his TED talk was that his life had been made hell by that girl who falsely accused him of hitting her. So in that case, women do have that sort of the privilege of being right before the law first, but at the same time, I think somewhere or the other this is required in a country like India, where in a city like Delhi, women can't roam alone out of their homes after 8 or 9 p.m. So like it becomes dangerous for women to be out alone at night, and they must need a trustworthy male friend, or their husbands or fathers or anybody who can be by their side and they can feel safe. So somewhere or the other this is required in the case of women, but everything comes with its pros and cons. So women do also, there are cases where there is the laws have been taken advantage of, but the cases where they are saved are also um, you know uh, very what should I say, like they are very good for women. Thank you.
Yes, Bharat, go ahead.
It might seem funny, but in today's era, some cities specifically, the people are doing the false marriages, and the girl came to the house and they take the jewelry and went and gone. And these situations are also, I think these news are common in the newspapers. Like, I think this is also happening.
Yes, definitely, Bharat. So, if anyone else has anything to add on to it, they can raise their hands, or we'll move on to the next point. So we'll move on to the next point now. So, how do you think what has been the role of major world events such as world wars or revolutions or just inflation over the years in general to the role of women in society? Like, has there been an effect of world wars or inflation in the role of women in society? Anshuman has also mentioned this before, but if anyone else has to add on to this point, or if you have to add on to this point, then please go ahead. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think especially in the Indian context, before going into the Indian context, historically, a lot of wars have been fought for women, and uh, if you go into ancient Indian scriptures, the Ramayana was primarily fought for women. The Mahabharata was fought because a woman was disrespected. The Trojan War in Greek mythology was fought because a woman was abducted. So I think, yeah, and I mean those stories are mostly like reflection of what events they had seen transpire in their own lives as ancients. So I think you, there is no doubt that there must have been lots of wars fought for women, because of women, to chase women, or so yeah. I think since we're talking only about war over here, so yeah, I think women have had their role to play in wars between empires, men, and also earlier women weren't on the battlefield, and now they're on the battlefield. So yeah, that's a big change. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yes, Bharat, please go ahead.
Um, One thing that I think I may talk on role of women. So role of women is like the women which were educated, skilled, and now also which are skilled or educated, or they fought for in the wars. They have the major roles like the inventions, or also they personally fought for the wars also. And the and one more thing that if you heard of in the history in 9th or 10th, in Vietnam, when the soldiers were dead, like specifically men were dead, women fought the whole war for I think 2 3 years. It was like USA was attacking, Japan was attacking, China was to occupy that place. They were like highly skilled and fought very nicely, and no one occupied that. And one thing, the women which were not skilled or which are not able to, like in present scenario, we can see that in a, when the Ukraine people are migrating to the uh, surrounding countries, they are facing the personal issues like security issues. They are facing the crimes, and which are the skilled people which have the informations that something is happening in the country. They have already gone a year ago from Ukraine to the safe place. But the, I can specifically say the word Janta, the common people, they face a lot during wars. I think so.
Rightly said, Bharat. Please, Anjuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, and another point that just came to my mind was that historically, it among the more honorable and civilized nations on earth, among the more moderate civilizations, it had when during warfare, it was considered an honorable act to spare women and children, and also like men would fight to death to protect their women and children. So I think even in that sense, that has been one dimension in which women have played a role in warfare. And yeah, and then also if you talk about like the Mongol army, or various other armies around the world, the prize for the soldiers for pillaging a city or pillaging a village had been that you get both gold and you get to rape the women in that town. So yeah, these are two aspects where yeah, in which women do play a role in warfare.
Yes, definitely. Also, like, just to add on my point, that even though earlier women, if we see the Indian context, there have been many examples of women performing activities like Johar after a war, where they used to sacrifice themselves. But now we see that we are having fighter pilots as women. We have seen women in battlefields. That has been a very drastic change over the years. Yes, Kunal, please go ahead.
Actually, I don't want to speak much, or I don't have a point here. I just want to ask an open-ended question. Like, if anybody knows, how has the female gender contributed, or if they have contributed or have been given the chance for contributing to war as a strategist rather than being on the field fighting with weapons. So if historically women, I just want to ask that if women have been involved in strategy or as strategists in war. Thank you.
Yeah, even I want to know about that. But I guess Anshuman has something to say about it. But since Bharat raised his hand before, we'll listen to his point first and then move forward. Yes, Bharat, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to answer the question that yes, there are so many examples you can find out that they have made the strategies, they have fought out the war, they have run the kingdom. They were so brave and they were so intellectual, I think. There's no chance of thinking, but it is a history you can read out there. And thing you speak, one thing you speak that they have done the Johar or sacrifice, no? So it is not that they were coward, so they sacrificed. They fought for the last moment, and when the thing which came to abduct her, then at the sense of uh, personal security, it was done. No, nobody said it was covert, but she said we had now the Indian pilots and Indian fighters. So in the sense, I'm not, I'm not, ऐसे नहीं कह रहा हूँ, but like I'm saying that they were capable of fighting and they fought. That was the case of the last moment they were. Yeah. It was an act of courage. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, Bharat. Uh, Even I didn't mean to say that it was an act of cowardice. I was just saying that the form of showing their bravery has changed. So if it was of any offense, and I'm sorry, but I didn't mean it like cowardice. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. Historically, hold on, let me address this first. It's going to trouble me later. Johar was an incredibly honorable act. It is committing suicide in order to protect your honor, so that your honor isn't defiled after your men have died. And nobody said it was cowardice. And anybody that says it's cowardice can challenge me right now. So uh, getting that out of the way. Since we were talking about the role of women as military leaders and strategists in the past, I think we definitely have lots of examples. We have Jhansi Ki Rani, we have Ahilya Bai Holkar, we have Cleopatra. So I think if you look for examples, there have been countless examples where women have led nations, states, and armies into warfare. And obviously, back in the day, that if you were the head of an army, if you were leading an army, you had to fight alongside your army on the battlefield. Unlike today, where a politician can order a drone strike or order their army to go halfway across the world to fight somewhere else in order to install democracy or any trumped up reason. Back in the day, the people issuing the orders had to be on the battlefield to fight. And that's definitely a big difference. So yeah, uh, since these women were leading these armies, best believe they were also fighting. And obviously, like, you see depictions of Jhansi Ki Rani fighting to her death. And yeah, so there are lots of examples.
Definitely, Rani Lakshmibai remains a childhood hero of everyone. So if anyone else has to put forward their point, they can raise their hand. So we move on to the next point. Yeah, so the final point for today's discussion would be that media representation and body positivity and how the clothing of women have changed over the years. These are things that I consider to be quite like stereotypical since historical times. Like earlier in media representation, we used to see women as more docile and feeble-minded and always listening to what others say. But now we see more strong characters. And also in clothing, we used to see like corsets being worn by women during or before French Revolution. And obviously, the body positivity has always been a big issue. So, how do you think that has changed over the years? Yes, Bharat, please go ahead.
Please brief the question. I was not aware.
Yeah, like if we talk about women then versus now, so how do you think that media representation and the whole fashion industry as a whole, including the beauty aspect and the body image that has been constructed around women, has changed from then to now?
So yeah, I think there is more scope in now modern era for that field you are telling. I think there is more scope and more growth in today's era. I think like they go for the Miss World and Miss India and the beauty contest, and they are leading as the great actresses. I think
Yes, Kunal, please go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to say, am I audible clearly? I think my network is.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
audible.
Okay, okay. So the one thing that I want to just say regarding this topic is even in our schools, like our history books in India point to the fact that in Victorian England, how women or girls were, given a certain beauty standard, and because of that, they had to go through um, things like wearing corsets or something to make their waists look slimmer, and doing other bodily transformations just to fit into a standard that is set by the monarchy itself. But nowadays I think it is much more freer, and as far as the situation is concerned, I don't think now you have to, or even in countries like England, which is supposed to be forward or Western, uh, are following those things. Like basically, the most cruel sort of clothing came from the so-called Western world, which later got passed on to India in some sense, like even for men, in the sense of dressing. But now I think mostly credited to again, like I mentioned previously, the generational change. I think it is much freer now for anybody to wear anything. um, yes. Thank you.
Exactly, Kunal. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, so just adding a little bit to what Kunal said, we need to attach a sense of scale over here once again. It was a very small minority of women who did that, not all women. Where it was expected of noble women, ladies in noble houses, and the royal family. So a very small minority of women were actually engaging in that beauty standard, trying to live up to that standard. And I think it hasn't pretty much gone away. Again, it's like a small minority of women chasing other beauty standards that are there today um, with implants and plastic surgeries. So, like if you consider the gathering place of those minority of women back then, it might have been castles in England. Today, it's Beverly Hills, Los Angeles. So if you take a walk down there, you're bound to see plenty of people with fillers, implants, and plastic surgery. So I think that pretty much still is there. And I think yeah, but then I know people today are more aware of the long term consequences of these things, and I'm not sure if people were aware of the long term consequences back then. Uh, I I think they must be, and they accepted that risk of in order to go after what they wanted to look like. And I think the same is present today. And then again, even back then, the majority of women did not wear that sort of clothing. And even today, majority of women, even though I mean, most women today have makeup, and that's one way they can try to transform themselves. But I think such extreme measures again are taken by a very small minority of women. Yeah, so that's what I want to say.
Yes, definitely. From the Victorian Hall to the Beverly Hills, the most important thing is how happy you feel in your skin. Yes, Bharat, please go ahead.
Just of a note of history, we can, if we can see in the Germany, the Hitler in the past days set the standard for the appearance of persons. Like he want that type of persons, like he want, like for example 5 feet height. So he genocide uh, all the citizens except the 5 feet person, or he want the appearance like the Aryans will be the people only living here. So he genocide all the people expect that criteria. So that was a cruel truth that.
It's true. Yes, Anshuman, please go ahead.
Yeah, that reminded me of something about how um, in various civilizations, through various periods of time, a fairer skin has been desired from a woman. Even in nations like England, like a woman who had like the complexion of milk was considered to be more suitable than a woman that was darker or out in the sun. Even in ancient Japan, women used to powder up their faces white, or paint their faces white, because that was considered really attractive. And even today, in countries like India and South Korea, women use a lot of fairness creams in order to make their skins fairer. And I haven't quite figured out why, like what is the reason behind that. So if anyone knows, let me know. Yeah, Bharat wants to say something.
I think India is the host of every Western shit comes. I don't know why. India consumes the max to max product of the, due to the huge population also. And they feel matlab, uh, 5 years back, people usually feel proud to use the Western things like Western products or the Western style of wearing and that kind of things. But now I think people are aware of the consequences of the something that things, and they are moving back to their culture, and they are understanding that.
Uh, Right. So if we don't have any other point, we'll wrap up. But before that, I guess like just Anshuman asked like why women do that. I guess that's because of these stereotypical images of how women should be, and that societal pressure that they face from a very young age, which forces them to take such measures and apply those heavy makeup and creams, etc. But also, like we have seen that those pressure has decreased over the years, or let's say transformed over the years, and hopefully there will be change in future. So if anyone else has to say anything, then they can raise their hands or we'll wrap up. Yes, Anjuman, please go ahead.
What I'm wondering is that across various civilizations that probably had no contact with each other regarding this sort of thing, or maybe did have contact, but of course they have their own societies. They probably did not import ideas of beauty from other nations. Why was it that across the world, uh, a fair skin in Japan, Korea, India, England, why was a fair skin preferred? And even I think in the Western world that transformed a little bit, in the sense that later on tan women were preferred over fair women, and so women so you have the business of artificial tanning and tanning beds uh, in uh, uh, in the Western world, in the UK uh, and the US. But yeah, I mean, I wonder why that used to be the case and still is the case today. If you guys know, let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question, and we'll keep that for the comment section for now. So yeah, with that, I guess we'll wrap up the debate. If anyone else has something, they can raise their hands. If no, then we'll wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining the interaction today. And we have more such events lined up in future. We have more such events lined up in future, and do join in for those. Thank you everyone.